Welcome everybody. This is a video that a lot of you have requested, so I'm excited to finally be making it. If you enjoy this video, go ahead and check out my other game, Bucket Detective, which is available now in the Steam store. It's $4 and has what I think is a great developer's commentary as well. There were people who didn't like the game at all, but liked the developer's commentary and gave the game a positive review for that reason alone. Also, think about hitting the old subscribe button. I put out a video every Monday. I talk about old projects. I have a bunch of new projects that I'm working on, this channel is probably the best way to keep up with those. I also make a bunch of videos just about making different things, living that art life. I'm going to start with a brief recap of Static Speaks My Name history. If you've seen my other videos talking about this, you can go ahead and skip forward to put the timestamp somewhere in here. The Static Speaks My Name was the first real game that I ever put out. Up until that point, I'd taken part in game jams or just made stuff that my friends had seen. The original idea for the game came out of a game jam. It was for Ludum Dare, which is a 48-hour game jam where participants are given a prompt. My prompt was Connected Worlds. I had the idea going into that competition that I wanted to make a puzzle game where a player was trapped in a room, and in order to get out of that room, they had to commit suicide and turn into a ghost and then go through the walls. That was going to be one of the steps in the puzzle. So that's basically all I went in with. And obviously the game is not that, but that was kind of, I did go in knowing that I wanted somehow to use suicide as like a theme or a tool. So I made the original version of the Static Speaks My Name in 48 hours, submitted it, and felt really good about it. It was the first thing I'd made where I was like, felt like there was something kind of cool about it. A few weeks went by and we got our scores. The Static Speaks My Name scored really, really high in the mood category. And I also got a lot of comments of people saying, wow, this was really cool. There was nothing else like this in the game jam. And it was just a great motivator because at that point, I knew that I wanted to make something a little bit bigger, spend several months making a project. And after the reception that this 48-hour version got, I decided this was going to be the game that I made. I was living at my aunt's house in my hometown at the time, so I bunkered down, and over a period of about 4 months, I made the version of the Static Speaks My Name, which you know. Because I'd never put anything out, my goal was get 100 people to play it, get their feedback, figure out why it sucked, and use that information to make my next game better. I posted it on the TIG Source forum, which is, TIG Source stands for the Indie Game Source. And pretty quickly, a guy who ran a website called Alpha Beta Gamer reached out to me. He had found Static on this forum and wanted to feature it on his site and asked if that was okay. And I was like, are you kidding me? That would be amazing. I had never really had anything featured anywhere. And I was like, dude, whatever you want to do, put it up. Like, that would be, that'd be the coolest thing I could imagine. And because of that, it gave me the confidence that maybe I should send it to a few other websites. I sent it off to a few other places, indiegames.com, just some different indie game websites. And people seemed to think it was a cool thing. People started downloading it. Around that time, the first YouTube video of someone playing the game appeared. And that was like mind-blowing that someone would play my game in order to entertain other people. That was just a very cool idea. And then more and more YouTube videos started appearing, and bigger publications started covering the game. And then it really just kind of went out of my hands, and bigger YouTubers started playing it one after the other. I think Jacksepticeye was the first one. That one easily broke 1 million views. Markiplier, PewDiePie. So there it is. That's a rough abridged story, but let's boot up the game and get into the nitty-gritty. You can see for setting graphics quality, you can choose between good and really good. Just my opportunity to put a little joke in there before the game even starts. I don't think there's a difference between good and really good as settings. Unity 4, it's the last version of Unity. Unity is currently on Unity 5. It's a great engine for making games. It's what I would recommend for anyone wanting to make indie games. I mean, there's some other ones, of course, Game Maker, Unreal, but I have a particular fondness for Unity. It's good for both 3D and 2D games. Game Maker is a bit more geared towards 2D games, Unreal 3D games, so I like the flexibility of Unity. Got the instruction screen up here for all you font heads. This is, I think this is Calibri. I don't know if that's how you say it, but the font is Calibri, and I hand drew over this using the pencil tool in Photoshop. These are just 2 frames flipped back and forth, slight differences in each to give a little texture, a little movement, things I very much enjoy. I don't know if that sounds sexual. I definitely recommend checking out another video I did called I Found the Lost Prototype for the Static Speaks My Name. You can compare the 48-hour Game Jam prototype to this version, and you'll find that this intro is very, very similar. You notice the sounds get louder. This is, you interact with this or you get close to it and you see, this has something to do with suicide, I'm guessing, though I intentionally kept it vague. What's going on here, this effect you see in front of you is using Unity's particle generator. It's just a bunch of particles. The particles you see for the stars or whatever you want to call it going on in the background, also particle generator. Unity's particle generator is really, really good. A lot you can do with it. Those particles in the background are just going in one direction and going for a very long distance. The particles in this cloud of static are all emitting from one place and terminating almost immediately after they emit. So they're coming out of a sphere, going in all directions, but then immediately terminating. That's why you have that kind of like churning like effect. Again, there's a lot you can do with the Unity particle generator. Jacob Earnholtz, age 31, asphyxiation by hanging. I used music here to guide the player, or the sound effect to guide the player. Starting the player in a big open space like this, I had to be sure that they went into... I didn't want to tell them where to go, so using sound, which increases in volume, nice subtle way to guide players towards where you need them to go. That's a lot of what game design is figuring out more subtle ways to get players to do what you want them to do. You can always say, you put the text up on screen, go to this location, but that's less interesting. It's less fun for the player. It's kind of less creative as a game designer. So the static speaks my name. Waking up early. Today will be a better day. $3:22 a.m. All right, objective 1, use the bathroom. Turn off alarm because that's kind of annoying. At the time, my 3D modeling skills were very poor, and doing things like those pillows was for me an incredible challenge. I spent a very long time trying to make those pillows look somewhat not like just, polygonal blocks. I was also happy with the scattered way of the sheets. I thought that was well done. Again, at the time, look at that. Wow. These are the things you take for granted until you try and do it yourself. I should right out the bat mention the music, which was made by a good friend of mine, Sean Claude Jones. He did music for this game, for Bucket Detective. He also did music for a short film of mine. Truly, the music adds so much to this game. He tells me it's still one of the songs that gets most played on his SoundCloud, and without this music, the game would have just been a much drier experience. So, thank you, Sean. Like I said, I really didn't know anything about 3D modeling when I made this. So something that you will notice is that there aren't really many textures. When you make a 3D model, the way you apply textures is with something called UV mapping. I think it gets the name because like a 3D model in 3 dimensions, it has 3 axes, X, Y, Z, and then U and V are its two-dimensional, the two-dimensional plane on which you create the map out how it's going to be wrapped onto the 3D object. I'm guessing it's called UV maps because they wanted to save UVW. Maybe they want to save W for when they added 3-dimensional texture maps at some point in the future. I don't know, just a guess. But anyway, these UV maps are how you kind of, if you imagine taking a 3D model and unfolding it so that it fits onto 2 dimensions, onto a single image, you then take your image editing program and you draw onto that UV map, and then that gets wrapped around your 3D model. It's actually sort of difficult to unwrap a 3D model and keep textures from stretching, and you have a curved surface, and it's sort of, you have to do it in a certain way, and a curved surface meeting a perpendicular surface, you have to make sure there's not seams and all this stuff. So I opted for the lazy man's way out, and I didn't UV unwrap almost anything. The only stuff that has textures on it are flat surfaces like the painting. Everything else, what I did is I wrote a script where I could change the color value of the entire model. So most objects in here, each model only has one color to it. So if I wanted to have something be a different color, I'd have to make it be a different model. Terrible way to do things. It also meant, because I did it as a script and not as a colored texture, which I really should have done, when I looked at the game in the editor, everything was just white. So it really was hard for me to see, like if I made any aesthetic changes, I had to run the game to see how they actually looked. Newbie mistakes. I should also add that a lot of 3D modeling software now has an automatic UV unwrapper, which is more than sufficient for a beginner. So I don't know if I even knew that there was an automatic UV unwrapper at the time. I used Maya LT, I believe. It's the kind of budget version of Maya, which is high-end 3D modeling software. Modo is another good one that's decently affordable. And then I made the textures, as I mentioned before, in Photoshop. I always felt proud of the sink area. That little toothbrush was felt like I did well with that one. Used toilet. A lot of people seem to think it's very funny that this guy sits down to pee. I agree. I think it there's an interesting feel to it. It sets a nice tone and all that. I hope I'm not demystifying things by talking a little bit about why certain choices were made. I won't explain what the choices mean necessarily, but because the intention of the game is still the intention of the game, whether or not whatever brought me to it. But what I was going to say is that I actually initially had him sit down and pee because I wanted the player to use the bathroom, but I thought, okay, standing up and peeing, I don't know how to do a particle effect that will look good enough like pee. And so I was like, well, if I have him sit down, I don't have to do that effect. So it was a simple saving myself from having to do work, which I was worried I wouldn't even pull off well. Had I wanted him to really stand up and pee, if I thought that was important, I could have figured it out, but that was kind of where the idea came from. I also think the little candle by the toilet is cute. Look at those details, guys. One-man development team. Holy shit. Objective 2, eat breakfast. These objectives mostly triggered just by little trigger spaces. It's like a simple if-then type statement. If the player has used the toilet, then we set up a box here that is our next trigger. The trigger zone is invisible until the player uses the toilet, and then it becomes activated. And then when the player walks through it, it triggers our next objective text. One reason that the house is so dark is, again, practical. I really didn't know how to use Unity's lighting. And there was a thing where I'm still sort of confused by like baked lighting versus real-time lighting and how I don't know. I've never gotten baked lighting to look very good. Baked lighting is where you pre-render the lighting and then it's kind of cooked into the textures as opposed to being generated on the fly by the engine as the player's playing. Unity at the time, I believe, had a limit on 4 or 5 real-time lights. So I kind of had to pick a few areas where there was going to be light and use those to light the whole game. So, were I doing it again, I might actually have made the game brighter, but I'm glad I didn't. We've got one light here. We've got, light coming from the TVs. And then obviously the light coming from the player is the main light that lights things. But I think it actually achieved a really, really cool effect where you can't see very far in front of you. So it makes this creepy feel where you're just walking into you don't know what. The palm trees. I spent a lot of time making these variations. I love details, and I love it when something feels like, the creator actually understood their universe and actually spent a lot of time, like, I don't know. I wanted it to feel like, I didn't want there to just be like 2 different versions and it's like I'm saying, oh, the person here was obsessed over this, but it didn't really look like it. So I spent a decent amount of time doing all these variations and drawing on them, and these the player character doing these analysis of the painting, and it was just those are the kind of things that I love this one. Lines of influence ? That's something I'll do in every project I do probably for the rest of my life. I did it a lot in Bucket Detective too, just like thinking about all the individual sub-characters that you never see on screen, what they are actually like, what they would have brought to the world, how they would have done something. I think that generic stuff is just no fun. You can see the signature on one of them. So yeah, again, just breaking up the monotony of okay, these are all the same. Oh, this one's a little different. That's, to me, the kind of stuff I look for in games or books or movies or whatever. The palm trees, I say this in another video, but the idea for the palm trees actually came because I was making this 48-hour game jam version, The Static Speaks My Name. I'd made this house, I'd made the puzzles, I'd made all the interaction, and the walls were just completely empty. I had like 30 minutes till I had to turn in the game or I wasn't going to qualify, and so I made a quick drawing of a palm tree, and I started putting it up a few places, and I didn't have time really to make more paintings, but the more I put up this one painting, I was like, ooh, this is kind of interesting. This is going from me not having enough time to like, this is actually a choice. The more palm trees there are, the more interesting it gets, and it will mean that I can qualify for this competition. I also, weirdly, I just have a kind of a bizarre obsession with palm trees, not unlike our boy Jacob Bernholtz. It's kind of hard for me to explain. I'm not sure what it is, but I love just taking pictures of palm trees in my neighborhood. I live in Los Angeles right now, and there's something, I guess it's something about the contrast between like the ideal of a palm tree is like being in paradise, and there's all these like bizarre infected kind of dying palm trees. I don't know. It's just an imagery that it's a tree that speaks to me. What can I say? No pun intended. Again, more variations on this image. I really tried to just like get into this guy's head and be like, what are all the ways that you can interpret this tree? I will say it wasn't that hard to feel depressed and crazy. I was in a very dark place when I made this game. I was, I won't go into the details, but I was, I was very isolated. I was living in my hometown. I was very lost. I really had no idea what I was doing with my life. I felt a lot of bleakness, a lot of darkness, and I think, I think the popularity of the game and the way that it connected with people, it's amazing how. I think the reason is because that feeling made it into the game. I channeled how I was feeling into this thing. And and turns out I wasn't the only one who experienced that kind of dark bleakness from time to time. So in a weird way, it's like, I don't know, it's not like I wanted to be bleak that way, but something kind of interesting did come out of it. I do have also a sort of an obsessive temperament, so pretending to be Jacob Earnholtz wasn't as hard as one might hope. Okay, let's go to the kitchen. Let's get that breakfast. Yeah, more pictures out here. Oh yeah, blow-ups again. Yeah, just variations of these palm tree textures to give the game some depth. I also remember being very proud of this. The Chatworth Times newspaper. Jason Malone after a hiking trip. Police have few leads in disappearance of local painter. And then this one just always made me laugh. Tim Allen comedy special, a delight, say fans. I don't know. Open refrigerator. Still empty. I guess it's shrimp again. Walking through the world. I have never been a good animator, and what you see in front of you is probably still to this day the extent of my animating skills. It took me way longer than it probably should have to animate these little shrimp, but I felt very proud of them. I think they're very cute and disturbing at the same time. They are, as you can see, there's two varieties here. I basically made a shrimp. I did the model. And then I animated the little wiggling limbs, and then did two variations of that. So I took the wiggling limb shrimp, and then I made one that swam back and forth and turned around. And then I made another one that bobbed up and down, and then duplicated that and just made them kind of going adjusted the timing, put them in different positions. That's a lot of what making assets for a game is. You make one or two varieties, and then you place one upside down, you place one on the wall, you kind of find creative ways to save yourself time, and you do that at the lowest level, a one-man indie development, and you do that at the highest level, a 100-person AAA game company. It's the same thing. I remember being very excited when I came up with the idea for this guy to have a shrimp tank, to have pet shrimp. I just thought there was something. I'm all about that subtle weirdness. It's easy to be overtly weird and crazy, to make something that's just totally random and oh my god, that's like, I don't know, like, but I think I'm interested more in the just the subtle, like something. I mean, a shrimp tank is definitely, it's not like completely subtle, but like just in general having like a sense of like, I want to make people feel uneasy and uncertain if how they're feeling is how they're supposed to be feeling. I'm just always really interested in that line between reality and unreality, I guess. But I remember laughing really hard when I was like, this guy totally would have, instead of pet fish or a pet iguana or a pet dog, he'd have a shrimp tank, which I thought was funny. And then the tragedy of having to eat your own shrimp because there's nothing in the fridge. He's been locked away for too long. The fridge has gotten bare. That little squish noise at the end, I think, really makes the sound effect. Eat another shrimp. Chat online with friends. Oh, I should mention, so I wrote I did everything just about in this game. As I mentioned, I had a friend of mine who was a composer who did the music. I did the programming, the art, the design, the everything. But I did have someone help me with another game developer named Jonathan Brodsky, who helped me actually with this specific script right here. So I was having a really hard time with my again. This shows I'm not a great programmer. I've done it a lot, but I'm like mediocre. Like I'm solidly mediocre. And I was having a problem with my interaction script. Hit E to interact with something. What was happening was sometimes it would, like with this here, you had to interact and then pause and then interact again. And it was firing both instantly. I just couldn't figure out how to like stagger the so that you eat one and then there's a pause and then you have to eat another one. So a guy named Jonathan Brodsky helped me out. We called this thing that he wrote super trigger. I think that was the term that we used. So yeah, I want to give him a shout out because actually the first version of Static Speaks My Name that came out had a bug in it where you this trigger here with eating the shrimp would misfire. And as the game started picking up steam and people were like reviewing it and playing it online, at first I was going to let it slide because I was like, well, like 1 out of 50 players are going to get this, maybe 1 out of 25. And as more and more people started seeing the game, I was like, 1 out of 25 is not good if one of those people is like playing this game on YouTube and 1 million people watch. So I decided to fix that one because it really diminished the experience of eating the shrimp, which was one of my favorite parts. Okay, chat online with friends. Yeah, again, this stuff, I was not in a great place in my life, and so a lot of this stuff was just drawn from, like, what my fucking day is, Yeah, here you start to see the hints of suicide coming. The reason I added this specific node in actually is interesting because I had some people play an early version of this game, and actually, it's funny looking back on this now, but I had several people tell me that I should remove the suicide. They, some people thought it was offensive or insensitive or something like that. And one person said the ending came so out of nowhere that it feels very arbitrary. And I thought that was a really good note, and that prompted me to place a few more clues in the game. Obviously, you have the, when you go into the static, you see the Jacob Earnhardt's death by asphyxiation or asphyxiation by hanging or whatever. But I thought, players may not 100% connect, like that's who they're playing as. It may, it's not totally clear. So I placed this note here. And I also placed this noose here. This is probably a little bit of overkill. But I wanted there to be a sense that something was coming, however subtle. I do kind of wish I didn't have that noose there because that is it's a bit on the nose. Don't you agree? All right, use computer. This was, I was so, this is one of my huge accomplishments in the game. First off, I loved making the graphics for this fake operating system. Obviously, it's based on, Windows, but it's just, I don't know, it was cool. I, disassembling the Windows user interface and, making my own kind of pixel arty version. I think it looks really good. It's I don't know. But getting all the layers that were required here to have the desktop background and then the buddy list pop up and then the chat window and then the chat to scroll. There were a lot of moving pieces here. And I just did it with a bunch of text layers, and it's all basically stacked on that screen. So if you were to take the screen and look at it sideways, there would be very subtle like layers on top of layers that disappear and move and reappear and all that kind of stuff. So there might be easier ways to do it. I'm sure there are. I didn't know what they were at the time. But yeah, in general, I feel real happy with how this looked, and I think this is one of my favorite parts of the game. I also think the game is cool. I mean, I make games, honestly, the type of games I make are like horribly inefficient because I like every area and experience to be completely unique. Like what a smart game developer does, they develop things with these loops, these gameplay loops. You design a system, and then you do like variations on the system, and you have kind of things that repeat. You build a tool and then you reuse it in different situations. I build a whole goddamn fake Windows operating system and chat interface, and then I only the player uses it for like 1.5 minutes or less. Very inefficient way to make games, but again, I like the detail, I like the complexity. I think that stuff is cool, so I do it. Not to hammer home the same point, but I wanted the chat responses to be. You come up with your first idea, and your first idea is often a little bit generic, so you want to like move past. I tried to think of interesting ways to convey a feeling. Instead of press G to say you're lonely or something, it's like, I don't know, if you can find a specific way of conveying something instead of like an abstract vague way, I think that's always more interesting. So, and then I liked the idea here of, of course I'm hitting G, and then your response is, you can't really articulate yourself, it's too shy or whatever. I want to say I like that the friends 0 out of 3, and then this person who messages you, of course, not even a friend. Again, here we're with these chat options on the side. You can see that you're conveying a bit of mental turmoil or instability or something. And I thought she liked me for me. Press E to stand up. Here's an interesting thing. I learned about this when people started speed running the Static Speaks My Name. Yes, people have sped run. Sped run? Is that the past tense of speed run? People have speed runned the Static Speaks My Name. And it turns out that you can actually, while you're having the conversation with Fairy9968, actually, I should mention Fairy9968, I don't want to say her real name, but my first girlfriend was an internet girlfriend who I met in an AOL chat room when I was like, 9 years old. And her name was something 9968. I still remember it. So there's a little shout out to you. I don't know whatever happened to you, my internet darling, but you got shouted out in the Static Speaks My Name. You probably don't even know it. You probably don't even remember me. Anyway, people sped-runned the game, and it turns out you can hit E at any point in that conversation and stand up. And when you do, you stand up and you see the two-dimensional, you stand up and the text is still floating in the air. Like, the text is literally, again, I do things always the worst way. That text is actually a 3D asset floating in midair. It just doesn't look like it because I placed it in a place where you can, it looks like it's UI text on the screen. But you stand up early and the chat keeps going without you, and that text is just kind of floating in the screen. So I thought that was cool. That is a cool thing about speedrunners. They break the game in ways that really the developers never even imagined. Okay, stand up, clean the microwave. Here's another one of those real-time lights I was talking about. This remote is so gigantic. I just think that's funny. It's not intended to be funny. It's just my scale was bad. Okay. Clean the microwave. This is, of course, also drawn from real life. I was, clean the microwave. I need a paper towel. Take a paper towel. This whole kitchen is actually basically based off of my aunt's house where I was living at the time. I would work in one of the bedrooms, and I would need to model a new asset. So I would walk out into the kitchen and be like, oh, what does a sink look like? And then I'd go back in and I'd model it. I'd go, oh, what does a microwave look like? Oh, what does a stove look like? So really, there is a lot more art imitating life than I'm comfortable with here, especially given the content of, Clean that microwave. Objective 5, decide what to do with the man in the cage. It was definitely intentional to have the most mundane possible task imaginable, cleaning a microwave, before Objective 5. I think a lot of my background is in film and writing, and with film, I think a lot about, you've got the story, the beats that are happening, but there's also an emotional rhythm that things go through. And I'm always thinking about that with anything I make, is like, how is someone feeling right now? And how do we, where did they come from with how they're feeling? How does that affect where they are now? And what are they about to feel next? And just making sure that you're kind of going through this rhythm, like horror movies, for instance. You have a really scary thing that happens, and then you use humor to break the tension, and that lulls people into a sense of safety, and then you bring back the horror. It makes, if something were to be all horror, all intense, you would sort of become numb to it. But when you use these emotional variety, you keep people on their toes, and you also make each emotion, I think, hit harder. So it was definitely intentional to have something mundane before this, what is, I think, is like the first kind of big twist of the game. I don't know. It seems to be when people play the game on YouTube, that's where they make a big reaction. Oh my God, there's a man in a cage? Because clearly it's something you haven't seen up until this point. Okay, I want to mention Dip Adaman here because I love Dip Adaman. I was making this insert for the circuit breaker or whatever, and I just started thinking about, okay, I based this off my aunt's circuit breaker box, and there was it says for maintenance, contact, blah blah blah, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, can I put some personality in just this little piece? So I came up with this guy named Dip Adaman, and I haven't gotten to use Dip. I wanted to try and find a place to put him in Bucket Detective, but I need to use Dip Adaman again in something, because the idea was basically this. I heard This American Life. It's called like Tiny Tyrants or something, and there was a guy who ran like a small town's Department of Water and Power, and he basically, this nothing town, nothing governmental department, he became like a small dictator where he was like he had all these like Game of Thrones like power struggles with his underlings. He was for sure the king, and they would, if people didn't like listen to music that he liked or whatever, he would like torment them. So I don't know. Anyway, Dip Adaman in my mind became this guy, so I just started coming up with this character. And one of them was going to be that Dip Adaman always signed his, he would put little quotes on stuff. And they were quotes that he didn't come up with, but he took credit for. So it's like, a woman is like a tea bag. You see it here. A woman is like a tea bag. You can't tell how strong she is until you put her in hot water. I think that's a quote from like Eleanor Roosevelt or something, but I just thought it'd be funny if Dip Adaman took credit for it. And I was going to have more of these, like, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, Dip Adaman. So I don't know. Dip Adaman, I hope he makes a return. I just think the name is hilarious. And so I had this conception for this character. And of course, it doesn't really come through here. It's only like you see one quote and his name. But that just gives you some sense of how I think about these things, and probably why it takes me so long to make shit. Okay. Let's see, how do we... Oh, yeah, we have to get the... Take keys. I like this, too, that this is a little, like, you don't necessarily find the man in the cage. My games don't have much replay value, but this is a little bit of replay value. It adds an extra 6 minutes of replay value. Yeah, just, again, liking to add those details in there. Uganda and You, How Genocide Might Affect Your Weekend. The Autoerotica of Benjamin Franklin. Some of these are probably a little too... funny for like what they what this game actually is. I don't know. Six Slugs for Mario. That is a both Six Slugs for Mario and Mayor's Town are both they're both screenplays that I wrote. They were both feature films that I wrote and was trying to get money for back in the old days. So I thought I'd throw in a little homage there. ZF Lincoln was, I don't know, cool name, I thought. Before I opened this up, I also had some other good books. Making book titles is like one of my favorite things in games. What's the Least He Can Eat? A Guide to Raising Thin Children. I love that. Faking Spanish, Impostero Español. Not Waving But Drowning, Devin Waite. A friend of mine, she wrote and directed a feature film that I worked on before this game. It would have been like 4 or 5 years before that. It was a film that had now some famous people in it. At the time, they were just nobodies, but now they've gone on to fame and glory. It's an awesome movie. Go check it out. I think it's definitely at least on Amazon, but maybe you can might be on Netflix too. Adam Driver was in it. It was like one of his first movies. Actually, he had to leave set one day. He had to go take a little break from set to go audition for a show called Girls, which he of course ended up getting, and the rest is history. He's Kylo Ren now. Also on the show, or on the movie, in a short film played before the movie, also directed by my friend Lily Reinhart, who's on Riverdale and was in Hustlers, and she's super famous now too. A little behind the scenes. Let's see if there's any other book. Oh, W and the Freedom Fighters, short film directed by another friend of mine, Caleb Rugg. Empty Women was the name of a little sketch group that me and some friends had in New York. So you can see some little homages to my life. Shrimp, Pink Gold. I just think that's funny. That Pink Gold is there's actually a book that is called something like Pink Gold, and I was just like, that just makes me feel so strange, calling shrimp Pink Gold. And so I hoped it would make you feel strange. Oh, look at this. I have seen some reviewers say that this is that a crazy or anxious person would never, that this is very on the nose writing. Need sleep, tired. This is stuff that I've written in my notebook at 3 a.m. in the morning. So it's it is on the nose, but those of us in the throes of depression are probably quite a bit on the nose. Another big animation here. This was a tough one to do. Coordinating that with the sound. Ooh. I did not make this 3D model. I got this. It took me a while to find the right 3D model because a lot of them were too realistic. This game is it's a low polygon, kind of blandish looking thing. I needed to find a model that was not too realistic. So I found this. I can't remember where I found this, but he was bald. What I did model was his hair, which I think is hilarious. I had to make a separate hair helmet model, and it was quite hard. I think I did an okay job, but I remember it was really tough to get the hair looking right. So here's one of the choices: unlock cage. I liked that, another little nice detail touch, eating the shrimp. Again, just wanted to do some cool variations of the painting. I like this one a lot here. Doing that what do you call it, like paint palette or whatever was tough for my skills at the time. I think it still looks pretty good, but just having different colored bottles and yeah, wanted to get that detail. So let's do the optimistic ending. We'll unlock the cage. Final objective: return to your room and let your body rest. Before I do that, let me think if there's any other stuff here that I need to talk about. Oh, let me mention this game. You can't go outside. You can't even see outside. And I think that adds a lot to the game, to the feel. But the main reason for that was, again, practical. To model and do the textures and do all the art needed for seeing an outside space requires a lot of work. And it's, to me, harder than doing the art for an indoor contained space. I did the same thing with Bucket Detective. You never leave. You never see outside. The windows in Bucket Detective have curtains over them, I think. And it's purely practical. A cardinal and the universal sin of beginning game developers is that they make a game that is too out of scope for their current skills. Everyone wants to make, well, it used to be the MMO. Now it's, Battle Royale or whatever. Whatever the big, trendy AAA game is, that's what people want to make. That is a terrible idea. You need to set your sights as small as possible, because the smallest possible thing, a game contained entirely in a tiny house, will take you twice as long as you think it is going to take you. Static Speaks My Name, I thought I would be done in a month or two. It ended up taking me 4 months. It seems unbelievable that this took 4 months, but making games is really hard. And the more you can reduce the things that you have to work on, the quicker you can make the game and the better you can make the game. Guess I could say something real quick about programming, which is that Unity uses either JavaScript or C# as its scripting language. I wrote everything in the game in JavaScript. C# is what most people use. So if you're starting off, that's what I would recommend. I don't really know why C# is better than JavaScript. I just know that that's what real programmers use when they work in Unity. That's what we use for Bucket Detective. I wrote everything in JavaScript. I knew I was a mediocre programmer, so I intentionally kept things simple. I didn't write complex physics things. I didn't have it where you were throwing a ball against a wall and had to, I made sure that the game was within scope of what I could make. And so I recommend the same for you. Alright, so going into the old closet, use the noose. This was a tricky animation to do. I spent a lot of time doing this. People will be curious to know that that is my voice. I recorded myself into a microphone, asphyxiating myself. I did not use a real noose, but that is me. So again, life imitating art, or art imitating life. A lot of people ask questions about the ending of the game, and I understand why. It ends in a vague, abstract way. But I have always believed that the role of the creator is to make the thing, and it's less fun if I go in and interpret the game for people. If to me, a part of this experience is the asking of the questions, is the coming up with the theories. There are so many great Steam threads about people speculating about the game. And I tried to give people enough information that they could that they could come to interesting conclusions. But I never want to answer things just because that's just, life is about the mystery sometimes, and art is definitely about the mystery, the tapping into something bigger than oneself. I do think what I am happy to talk about, and I love to talk about, obviously, are the craft decisions, the technical decisions, the how I created a specific object or area, and even what my thought process was going in. I wanted this to feel this way. I wanted this to feel this way. But in terms of answering the questions of the world, I did not want to do that. Here, I started with 2 objects in frame for a very simple reason. If I started like this, where you could only see one static object in frame, I figured players would think, oh, there's one object here. Let me go towards it and experience the next story or whatever. But if I started with 2 in frame, players would go, there's a choice here. And the curious ones would go, well, are there more choices? And of course, there are. A lot of people have also asked me and speculated about this one, why this one is a little bit darker. And again, I just can't give the answer. It's not up to me, the reasons. The theme I got for the Ludum Dare version of the game was Connected Worlds, and that's kind of where the inspiration came from here to, I guess also it's kind of interesting to me having the game, the setting is so mundane. You're in a house, and this takes the game out of the mundane. It was a simple kind of cheap way for me to add something else besides just the experience of being in the house. One of my favorite things in movies, books, whatever, is the feeling of a larger world, and I guess that was what I was kind of trying to do here. All right, so let's go into one of these static balls and we'll end it. What's it gonna be? Is it gonna be ZF Lincoln Nimbletall Overdose? Yes. Astute followers will remember that the book Six Slugs for Mario was written by by ZF Lincoln, and as we all remember, that's something that I wrote. I hope that this doesn't. It's not an omen of things to come. Let's go ahead and go into the Vincent Nambalia. And that, my friends, is the end. This song here was written by Sean-Claude Jones, who did the other music for the game. It's something he wrote before I even met him, and I asked him if we could use it because I just thought it was an awesome song. I felt it summed up the emotion or something well. It just had a good feeling for the playing over the credits. The character controller, which is the movement of the character and the vision and all that stuff, was actually an asset written by someone else, a game developer named Ben Esposito. He didn't write it for me. It's just something he created and put online for other people to use. So, and we drop right out to the end of the game, which I also thought was cool. Yeah, he created that for other people to use. He made Donut County and a bunch of other games, and it was nice to not have to write my own. Unity has a built-in character controller, but it was limited in certain ways, and I forget exactly what his character controller had, but it definitely had some additional features that the Unity one did not have. All right, that's it. This is a long video, but I wanted to make it long because I didn't want to leave anything out. This is the official, in canon, Static Speaks My Name directors, developers commentary, so I wanted to leave no stone unturned. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and maybe I'll do a little follow-up answering some questions for people. I hope you enjoyed it. If you actually watched that whole thing, you definitely should subscribe to my YouTube channel here. Click that little subscribe button. I put out a new video every Monday. I also recommend, like I said before, checking out my game Bucket Detective. Listen to the little developers commentary in there. It's people seem to enjoy that, even if they don't like the game. And follow me for new projects. I'm focusing on film and writing for the moment, but I do think if you like my games and you like movies, you will like what is coming. So as an artist, I like to, not keep people on their toes, always be experimenting. So I figured going into a new medium was the perfect way to do that. All right, everyone, I will see you next Monday. Thank you for watching, and have a good week. Bye.